Hey everyone, today I want to talk about skill challenges and how they can be an amazing part of your campaigns if you approach them just a little bit differently. Skill challenges have been around for a long time. They received a lot of bad press in D&D 4th edition as another reason that people gave for not liking that version, yet they exist in other versions and they continue to be used all over the place. Let's talk a little bit about what they are, why they exist, what the problems are with them, and what we could do to make them better. If you like these videos, please click that like button, subscribe to the channel, and if you want to help the channel out even more, there are other ways to do that down in the description. And don't forget to check out the free newsletter. That link is also down in the description. But let's get started. To really understand skill challenges, we have to first look at why they exist. Role-playing games consist of many different parts. The most obvious and mechanically heavy is combat. Every edition of the game contains a ton of rules to help run combat encounters. We're all familiar with armor classes and hit points and attack bonuses and damage dice and on and on and on. These are the mechanics that put a framework around that aspect of the game. The rules also provide class features and magic items and other things that will alter the rules around combat and add variations that allow the players to strategize. But what about other parts of the game like exploration and role-playing? In most cases, this is simply left to the dungeon master to present a problem to the players and allow them to try to solve it using their skills and abilities. And it works fine, and some might argue that it doesn't need any additional structure to it, but there is something to be said for having some mechanics to solve these other encounters, much like we have for combat. It would make it a lot easier to understand when the party is successful and would also help in determining how many experience points to hand out when the party completes that non-combat encounter. Enter skill challenges. As I said before, these existed before 4th edition and they exist in other game systems as well, so love them or hate them, they are everywhere. But what is really the big problem with them? The biggest complaint has to do with the freestyle nature of role-playing games. The core idea is that the dungeon master presents the players with a problem and the players are free to come up with creative solutions to those problems. While everyone seems fine that this freedom is constrained a little bit when it comes to combat, many feel that trying to wrap rules around non-combat gameplay is a bridge too far. And these arguments are not without merit. I will agree that the way skill challenges are presented can seem very game-like and can ruin the immersion at the table. If not run properly, skill challenges can be very clunky. The biggest problem I have with skill challenges is that they are too focused on what the players can do instead of the problem itself. And what do I mean by that? In a combat encounter, the players enter a room and are presented with a horde of goblins who immediately draw their weapons. Just beyond the goblins is an open treasure chest overflowing with gold. And that's it. The scenario has been presented to the players, and now they get to decide what they're going to do next. The group agrees on a strategy, and each player decides what ability they're going to use on their turn to help achieve the goal of overcoming these goblins and getting that shiny treasure. Skill challenges usually start out just fine. The players are presented with a scenario. They are sitting at a banquet table with the local duke. That duke possesses a map to a treasure that the party is seeking, and the duke is only going to share it with them if they earn his trust. Perfect. The party has a scenario and they can strategize together, and each player can use their skills and abilities at their disposal to help resolve the encounter. But this is where skill challenges can tend to get a little clunky. The difficulty of a combat encounter is easy to measure. Each monster has an armor class and hit points and special abilities that all translate to a number of experience points. Once the monsters are defeated, the party earns those experience points. But how do you measure the difficulty of a role-playing encounter? Skill challenges attempt to do this by introducing the notion of a number of successful skill checks against a number of failures. So as you use your skills to engage with that duke, you roll checks and the dice determine how you did. Much like making an attack roll in combat, except now we are attacking with our skills. This by itself is not bad, but then skill challenges start to overstep their bounds by listing out what skills the players can use and how they can use them. And that to me is like if the combat encounter listed out which weapons and spells could count for successes within that combat encounter. That just doesn't happen. The players in combat have the freedom to be creative and come up with their own ideas. The same needs to hold true for skill challenges. As soon as the skill challenge tries to restrict the player's creativity, they have crossed a line, and I completely understand the frustration. But it doesn't have to be this way. Every skill challenge can be easily adapted to leave that creativity with the players. To do this, you need to think of NPCs like we do with the monsters. Each monster has an armor class that you have to overcome in order to hit, and they have a certain number of hit points that you need to deal with before the monster is defeated. They have damage resistances and special abilities that can alter that difficulty. The NPC in a skill challenge is the same way. To be allowed access to the map, you need to overcome a value attached to that Duke. You do this by engaging in role-playing with that NPC. What skills you use are determined by the Dungeon Master based on what actions each player wanted to take, but the nature of those actions is entirely up to the players. And this is not restricted to just encounters with NPCs. If you're running a survival encounter, then there's a value that would be considered a success for that survival. If you're running a chase, then there's a value that means you have escaped or that you have captured your target. The key is to look at the successes and failures as they relate to the target of the challenge, not the challenge itself. Let's look at this a little more visually. Think of a combat encounter. The likelihood of you winning a combat encounter is 50-50 when you start. With each action and roll of the dice, the possibility of success or failure changes. As the goblins fall, it becomes more likely that you're going to win. If those goblins get some good rolls, then it could go the other way. It's all about taking actions and moving the needle. A combat encounter against more difficult monsters might start the needle further away from success, and a trivial combat encounter against a couple minions might have the needle starting at a point where it would be very difficult to lose. Skill challenges are exactly the same. When you first sat at the table with the Duke, you had a 50-50 chance of convincing them to let you see the map. With every action and dice roll, that needle moves either closer or further away. If we add tick marks to the indicator, you can see how the skill challenge difficulty is being measured. If we start in the middle, then we need to get 4 successes in order to win at this encounter. A more difficult role-playing encounter might have more tick marks, so you need more successes, or the needle might start closer to the failure side. But either way, just like with combat, it's simply a matter of moving that needle using the tools at your disposal. So to make your skill challenges more interesting, don't get hung up on the specific skills. Think of it rather as difficulty of overcoming this particular NPC. The published skill challenge will give you some clues like how some piece of history could put you in the good graces of that Duke, but don't lock into those as requirements that the players need to do in order to be successful with the skill challenge. It's just information to help you understand that NPC. The specific skill that a player could use is not that important. What matters is that they are having success and moving toward their objective. Use the details of the skill challenge to help you determine how difficult a skill might be, and don't be afraid to adapt those values based on what the players have come up with. By the same token, don't worry about the notion of needing 8 successes before they get 3 failures. As we saw, this is kind of the intention around the skill challenge mechanics, but make sure it fits naturally into the game. If the party came up with a great idea for what they could do to convince the Duke to help them, and they are successful in whatever checks you give them, then feel free to say that they beat the challenge even if they didn't hit the target number of successes that was set in the rules. It's more about encouraging player creativity and moving the game forward in an enjoyable way for everybody. But let me know your thoughts on skill challenges down in the comments, and don't forget to check out that newsletter, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and until next time, take care.